Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to it. I'm Allistair McCaw. In this episode of What It Takes, I have former Manchester United, Everton and England football player Phil Neville. Currently the manager of the England Lionesses, Neville spent 10 years as a professional with Manchester United, during which time he won 6 Premier League titles, 3 FA Cups, 3 FA Charity Shields, the Intercontinental Cup and the Champions League. He joined Everton in 2005, where he spent the final 8 years of his playing career. He played for England 59 times between 1996 and 2007, representing the nation at 3 European Championships. Now, as many of you might already know, he comes from a family of incredibly successful athletes, having played for Manchester United and England with Gary, and of course, a former guest on the Champion Minded podcast, Tracy, who coached the England national netball team to Commonwealth Gold in 2018. Now, in this episode, we cover quite a lot. We get into leadership, we get into team culture. We also chat about his upbringing, growing up in the Neville family. We also talk about his transition from Manchester United to Everton, what it was like working under Sir Alex Ferguson and David Moyes, what he looks for in a player. He also shares his ability to overcome failure and setbacks. He chats about the work ethic of Cristiano Ronaldo and much more. Guys, I know you're going to enjoy this one. This is Phil Neville. Phil, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast. I must admit, I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I listened to the one you did with my sister. I hope this is as good as that one, because it's a competition between me and her, you see, at the moment.
Well, I tell you, she must be incredibly popular because, you know, sometimes I'll put a tweet out there saying, who would you like to hear on the podcast? And the name Tracy Neville came up probably the most. So I think she has a massive following there, just by the way.
No, she's got... she's obviously a gold medal winning coach, and she's really, really strong and tough, and her work ethic is fantastic. So no, it was a good one, that one.
So Phil, that's exactly where I want to start, because obviously you come from a family of successful athletes. Obviously Gary and yourself played for Manchester United and for the national team. You have Tracy who played netball at a high level and then obviously managed, as you just mentioned, they're a gold medal winning team at the Commonwealth Games. So I want to start with the Neville household, your upbringing. Describe to us how that was growing up.
Well, I think if you're looking for sort of like words to describe our upbringing, competitive, sporty, we're probably going to talk about values and culture on this call. We grew up with sort of like two parents that was really, really simple in their outlook in terms of, you know, the manners, that, you know, the please and thank yous were so important. The hard work, getting up in the morning. We get up at 6 o'clock every morning. That comes from my nana and granddad, who got up at 5, 6 o'clock every day, and they always used to say that was the best part of the day. So that went on to my mum, that went on to us. So we were just probably a simple family, lived in a little 2 up, 2 down terraced house in Manchester, who all sort of like philosophy was just to work as hard as we possibly could and grab as many opportunities in life as what we possibly could. But ultimately, there was no real demands on us. You know, people talk about my father saying, "Oh, did he take you to the training?" And no, he just wanted us to have fun and enjoy ourselves and just work as hard as we possibly could. And I think the biggest quality was love. The love that we had, the support that we had from our parents. I mean, me, my brother, and my sister. We speak every day now. We are the tightest brother and sister probably in a sporting environment that there is. And we just grew up on lots of hugs, cuddles and love. And that was the basis of what we probably grew up with.
Fascinating, because obviously you hear stories today of successful well, should we say, athletes who are trying to make it. Especially, I live here in Florida, so it's like a tennis and golf mecca,
Yeah.
and this is the state of desperate parents where. I know of parents who have given up mortgages on their houses to try and put their kid through, for example, an academy, a tennis academy or a golf academy. So there's like a desperation there. But it sounds like you Tracy and Gary were just self-driven. You didn't need your parents to say, get out there and train and go work harder.
No, but I think that they laid the foundations for that. Like if there was ever an opportunity to play football, we used to play every Sunday. And then if there was a game on a Saturday for a team, my dad would encourage us to play Saturday. And it was never a case of you will play, but it was a case of why would you not want to play Saturday? We used to play cricket in the summer, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, have a day off Friday and play Saturday, Sunday. And people say, oh, I bet you used to get bored. And we said, no, it was actually the best time of our lives. So I think the support that they give us and the encouragement that they give us. And the one thing that I would say that they put high demands on us was if you was going to do that thing, you had to do it to the best of your ability. You had to put the actual work in, and you had to make sure that you was enjoying it. If you weren't enjoying any of those things, then they would always disencourage us to take part in that activity. So I think their work ethic to get up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock every day, and they played sport as well, so it just became part of our routine. And but ultimately, we loved what we were doing. And I'm sure you do, Allistair, love what you're doing. And if you love what you're doing, you don't look at the watch. You don't look at what time to go home. You don't look at the hours you've spent practicing. It just becomes something that you just love doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. I mean, I can relate to that. I was brought up in South Africa, which is obviously, like Australia, for example. We played 7-8 sports in schools. That was one of the big advantages of being in South Africa, Australia, is that the schooling system is very much geared around sports just as much as academics. So, we had to play rugby, we had to play cricket, and then you could choose other sports after that, as being a boy, for example. But, I remember some days going from one sport to the other to the next and getting home at 6, 7 o'clock. So that was our upbringing. But you mentioned you played cricket, Phil, and you played at a very good level as a junior, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what you said then about playing multi-sports, if you look at the academy system now, the boys and the girls are only allowed to play football because they say concentrate on football. If I hadn't have played cricket, I wouldn't have made it as a footballer. If I hadn't have had the opportunities to play rugby in primary school, where you get hit over the shoulders, you get tackled from behind. The cricket, there's a great cricket story I always tell to teachers, really, is that when I was in 11, in the local leagues, we have first team, second team, third team. At 11, I was a third team cricketer. There was a shortage of players in the first team. One day, I went to watch my brother play, and they said, "Oh, we're short of a player. Phil, can you just come and be the 11th player? The one that just fields, doesn't bat, doesn't bowl." And after about 20 overs, I was walking into bat against a West Indian Test player, a fast bowler called Otis Gibson.
Yep.
Now, I had a helmet on, I had the full works on, and literally the first ball I walked into bat, I was literally 4 foot. I was this little boy, and everyone was like, "Oh," grabbing my cheeks. "Oh." Otis Gibson came off 2 paces because he felt sorry for me. 3 overs later, he was coming off his full run-up, bowling bouncers at my head because he couldn't get me out. Now, ultimately, we talk about mentally preparing someone for the critical moments, the moments that test you and take you out of your comfort zone. That was at 11-year-old. I was facing a test match. I wouldn't have made it as a footballer if I didn't have moments like that in my sporting upbringing. You know what I mean? And I think it's sad now that footballers can only play football from the age of 11 up to the age of 16. I'm like, they're missing out on so much development socially, mentally, and physically by playing rugby, by playing cricket, by learning other skills, if you know what I mean, Allistair.
Absolutely. I mean, I just think of like Roger Federer, for example, in an interview he gave a year or two ago, he said, up until the age of 14, I played squash. I played cricket because obviously, Roger's mom is South African as well. Yeah. He played basketball. He played all those sports. And he said exactly what you're saying right now. If it wasn't for those sports, then I wouldn't be the athlete I am today. And, you look at Steve Nash, for example, the basketball player.
Yeah.
he plays a very high level of football. He can mix it with some of the best guys. You looked at guys like Michael Schumacher, for example, when they played that exhibition football match before the Grand Prix. It was a good level, and that's what made them the athletes they were.
If you look at the boys that I grew up with, I played cricket. Scholes played cricket. Gary played cricket. Ryan Giggs was an unbelievable rugby player because of his speed, and his father was a rugby player in Wales. Steve Bruce, Gary Lineker played cricket. We were but you think about the physicality of playing cricket. Cricket is an 8 hours a day sport where concentration and mental awareness is absolutely vital. Rugby, physical toughness, leg strength, power, speed. I'm like, these are all the qualities that we talk about with Ronaldo. Unbelievable durability, unbelievable ability to be strength, power, speed, flexibility. I think the generation now are missing out on all those natural ways of becoming those physical specimens by just focusing on one sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, as you described, those sports gave you all the technical skills, for example, but would you say they definitely provided you with more grit and resilience to push on further? Because you see a lot of talented young athletes, and then they get to that fork in the road at 16, 17, where the mentally tougher ones go on to that next level, and the other ones maybe they were, like you said, more talented when they were younger at 11, 12, but then they fade away at 16, 17, for example. So would you say that background of your upbringing, the competitive nature within the household, and obviously playing other sports provided you with that grit and resilience?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think if you talked about the biggest learnings I had, and that I'm now trying to instill into my kids, really, is character building, resilience building, durability building. Is that ability, like you said, to play every day of the week, cricket every day of the week. That's like you go to school in the morning, you play PE, you do your football at school, you come home, you play cricket at night. Every day for the whole summer. That builds durability and character. And there's some days when you came home and you was like flagging, you had homework, and your mum and dad say, you've got cricket tonight, get out there and play. Or you didn't fancy it, you didn't feel great, but you went out there and played. That builds resilience, because when you leave school and you go into the professional world of any sport or life is not just a bed of roses. You're going to have bumps in the road, and it's the how you handle the bumps in the road that I think has probably made me have the career that I did, because it's the bumps in the road that made me tougher, and it kicked me on even further. But you have to be able to handle those setbacks, to be released, to be dropped, to be left out of the World Cup squad, or the major things that happened in my career actually were moments where I look back and think they were great learning moments. They became the great moments in my career rather than ones that destroyed me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and absolutely. That was something I wanted to go into a little bit further in the podcast, was failure and how you dealt with failure. Because obviously, there was moments in your career where you were dropped from Man United, you were dropped from the England team. How did you deal with those moments of, I wouldn't call it failure, but setbacks?
Well, we had a family motto, and our family motto was get up and get on with it. Get up and get on with it. I never forget when I think it was about 11 years of age, I missed a penalty in a game at school. I came home, cried my eyes out. We'd lost the game. It was a semi-final. And my dad, who would never really get angry with me on my performances, he went absolutely mad at me and said, just shut up, get up and get on with it. And from then on, that was our motto of just dealing with failures by working even harder, putting it behind us, looking forward. And I think we worked for a coach in Sir Alex Ferguson that was incredible at dealing with setbacks, incredible with dealing with defeats and disappointments. He would come in and he would obviously tell you, he would discuss with you, or he would have a go at you. Literally the minute that he stopped talking, he was looking forward rather than backwards. He wasn't dwelling on the past. He wasn't thinking about the disappointment or the success. We used to win titles, and then the day after we'd be getting the bus home from the hotel. He would be already planning the next year's or the next day's training or how we're going to get better. So we were never allowed to wallow in self-pity at home or at work, and I think that is it's a great mentality to share with your players. Move on as fast as you can. Don't dwell on the past, because ultimately you're wasting energy and time thinking about what's gone on in the past rather than focusing on how you can improve yourself going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, you mentioned there Sir Alex Ferguson, and that's definitely one area I wanted to go into chatting with you. What was it like working under Sir Alex, and was he as tough as he appeared to be on the outside?
He was tough, and his standards were so tough. His standards were actually tougher than what he was, because he demanded every single minute of every single day. You talk about high performance environments or high performance. I got asked that question the other day on another podcast I did, and they said, look, describe what high performance environment means to you. And I just kept thinking about the simple things that Sir Alex used to tell us, doing the right things every minute of every day, of every week, of every year of your life. And he said that's high performance, when you don't ever let your standards drop. And people ask me about Sir Alex, what was his biggest qualities? He had the most simple values that you could ever wish to have, but he was an absolute genius at enforcing them, because he never allowed your standards to drop. And if you dropped them, he would give you probably a kick up the backside. If you dropped them again, he would really consider. And then if he dropped them again, he'd get you out of the club, because he would not want anyone to fall below those levels. And what he then created was an environment where nobody else allowed the standards to drop. And it was, I go back to it again. I think we spoke on when we spoke in the past, it was please and thank yous. It was the way you dressed. It was the way you greeted each other. It was the way you worked. It was the effort level that you put in. It was the smile on your face. It was the words that you said. It had nothing to do with the result on the field, because that was just a byproduct of that environment that he wanted to create.
Yeah, incredibly interesting. I mean, obviously, I've read his book Leading, which I have here as well, which is probably one of my top 3 leadership books. But here's a question I wanted for you: would his style of leadership work today, especially with this generation? Because as we know, we've had the millennials, which are now 40, 41. The Z generation, which are 26, the Alpha generation now, which is teenagers. I believe your son is what, 14, 13?
18.
18, sorry, my apologies. I'm way behind on that one. Would you say his leadership style would have worked today?
His leadership style, what I would say from the manager that I met 30 years ago, it evolved with time. It kept evolving all the time. He was moving with the time. Almost, I'm going to say, he moved before the time. I never forget, we got into the first team, 18 years of age, and we came to a pre-match meal. Pre-match meals back then was literally eat what you wanted to eat. And all of a sudden we were eating pasta. We were eating pasta probably 2 years before the whole of the Premier League was eating pasta. He was ahead of his time. He brought sports science in 2 years before sports science came into football. So what he was always doing, he was always moving with the times. And his real sort of like speciality was, he would get the best practitioners in to take the new breed forward. He would always be learning off other people. What is the new skill? What is the new technique? What's the new system that people are playing? And then get the best in to help him implement that into his football club. And that's why he used to change his probably assistant every 2-3 seasons, because he just kept evolving and it was fascinating the way that he went from almost a leadership model with the old type players, the millennium type things, and then he brought in the foreign players where he had to adapt his language and his tone and his leadership style. And then obviously there was the next generation then of the academy system player where he had to change for them as well. So I think it was frightening the way he kept evolving, and he never stood still. The bus kept moving and he kept moving with the bus and driving it. And I think that is a great quality to have.
Just talking about that, I'm just thinking about, obviously, Ronaldo coming to Manchester United, and he had Carlos Queiroz as his assistant back then, and that was obviously genius, because Cristiano probably felt more comfortable speaking his mother tongue because he was a young boy at that stage. And then you had Rene Meulenstein, and you had the Van Nistelrooy, you had a few Dutch players, for example. So that was part of his geniusness, wasn't it, to make those type of star players feel welcome?
He always had a British coach, always, Brian Kidd, Jim Ryan Scottish, Steve McLaren was a fantastic coach. He had brilliant coaches. And then when the influx of foreign players came, you talk about diversity and inclusion. You have to have a diverse staff around you. Now, Now, if you go into a club, that's full of English people, then you have predominantly English British staff. But if you go into a multicultural environment where you've got maybe 5 Argentinians, 7 South Americans, 3 Asian players, you have to bring in a diverse and inclusive staff to relate and help those players within your staff. So ultimately now, player liaison officers are now multilingual. They can speak 3 or 4 different languages because they have to speak Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, English. So I think, again, Kyrgios came in when we had probably Kleberson, Ronaldo, David Bellion, who spoke French, and Carlos Queiroz spoke 5 different languages. So when he wanted to communicate with these players, Carlos could be that conduit between the link between him and the manager. And I think that's vital now when you're amassing in any organisation. You've got to assess what nationalities you've got on your staff, what cultural staff you've got, and then you've got to have a diverse and inclusive staff to provide for your workforce.
What would you say you've taken from his lessons into your own management position? Because obviously you're the manager now of the Lionesses. What did you take from Sir Alex most?
I think you've got to have a connection with the player and the person. The person first, the player second. When I signed at 11 years of age, I walked into the Cliff training ground, and Sir Alex Ferguson knew that my dad worked at Bury Football Club, my mum worked at Bury Football Club, my granddad worked at Bury Football Club. He knew that I played cricket. He knew that my dad was a cricketer. He knew that my mum played football. And the minute that my parents sort of like heard him speak about the depth of knowledge about our family, my dad just said, "You can trust this man with your life." His connection skills were fantastic. He knew everything about every single player. He walked into a room, and without speaking to a player, he could smell the sense of the room. He could understand how a player was thinking or feeling, and he knew exactly how to deal individually with every single member of his squad. So you got a squad of 26 players. Individually, he had a different way of dealing with every single one of them. And I always tell the story about when you go and see him in his office, and it was quite daunting. Nobody enjoyed doing it. It was almost like you would go in there. It was the last thing on earth that you had to do, and it was always, he had a way that if it was a real serious conversation, he would sit opposite you at the desk. If it was something about the way that he was playing, about your attitude, about something, he would sit opposite you at a desk. If it was something where he wanted to build you up, give you confidence, tell you how you was, give you a new contract, he would take you over to his settee, sit next to you, a little bit more interpersonal. And you think to yourself at the time, like, such a small thing, but that is genius in terms of how he made you feel. And you never left his office without feeling $1 million. You never left his office without thinking, that man has got my back. I'm going to run through a brick wall. Even if he was leaving you out the team, and he left me out the team a lot of times, I never left his office thinking I wasn't an important part of his squad, because the first thing he used to always say to me when he was leaving out, "Phil, I'm not playing you tomorrow, but you do not underestimate your value to me and to this football team. Without you, this team wouldn't be successful because of the commitment, your drive, your determination." So you would actually thank him for leaving you out. It was such a great skill he had of dealing with people. And I listen to Pochettino, I see Klopp, I see Pep. The way that they deal with people, for me, is far more important than the tactics that they have on the field or the system that they play.
Interesting. You moved from Man United to Everton, obviously, where you had almost similar amount of caps, around about, you had, I think, 273 for Man U and 240 something for Everton. So that was pretty close. You captained Everton as well, but tell me what the difference was like working. Well, we've obviously heard about Sir Alex, how he was, but working under David Moyes, what was the difference there in the clubs?
There's a big difference in the clubs. Management styles were two Glaswegians, two really intense people. David Moyes, he came at the right time in my career, that I needed someone that was, young, was really ambitious, knew he wanted to get to the very top. He wanted to be the best manager in the league. He wanted to build a fresh, new, vibrant football club, new training ground, etc. And he was someone that he became a mentor. He became someone that I was just fascinated with because of his drive and his determination. The difference in the clubs was, I suppose, the expectation. At Manchester United, you have to win. You have to win games of football. You have to win trophies. At Everton, you want to win. And there's a difference between wanting to and having to.
Yep.
I love both experiences. Both experiences, probably the Everton one was equally as rewarding as the Manchester United one because it made me grow up as a person. It took me totally out of my comfort zone. Sir Alex and Manchester United, we had a barrier around us. We were protected. Nothing got in. There was no leaks in that wall. And almost going out of the Manchester United bubble helped me grow up as a person, made me stand on my own 2 feet. It made me appreciate actually and grow as a person in my life, never mind as a footballer. And I think that equally was as good as and the similarities was that the supporters at either club were unbelievable in terms of the demands that they put on their players was fantastic, and that's really what kept me going at Everton.
So obviously, you talk about the mindset there as well as, like obviously at Man United, you were serial winners. It was like almost like the All Blacks, where, you're just not expected to lose. That's just as simple as that. But going to Everton, let's talk about, for example, the difference in preparation, the day-to-day practices, training, etc. What was different between Man United and Everton when you got there?
Practices were the same. I think I've also been in the Man United environment, England environment, Everton environment. I've watched best practice. The coaching sessions don't really vary much. The way that they're delivered, the quality of the sessions, that's where the variations are. And I suppose that when I first went to Everton, I was absolutely blown away with the intensity of the work, the ethic, the fitness of the players was incredible, and the work ethic was unbelievable. It was like it blew me away. It took me to another level physically. But I suppose the difference is that I go back to the best players do it every minute of every day on and off the pitch.
Yep.
And on the pitch, the intensity levels were the same. But when you got off the pitch, particularly in my first couple of seasons at Everton, what you eat, the way you sleep, the way you prepare, the hotels the night before the game, there was a big shift. There was a big shift in attitudes. And it wasn't until probably my second and a half season at Everton that we started to get that level of high performance. And that was because we changed training grounds. We got younger, hungrier players. But ultimately, you have to eat, breathe, sleep football, and do it from the minute you wake up, from the minute you go to bed. And I think that was probably in my first year at Everton was the big thing. I thought, dear me, I'm sort of like, this is a little bit different. This is not the real top level. It got there with Everton, but at the start, it took a while to get to it.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you this question because obviously it's a very famous moment where two brothers are leading their teams against each other. Man U and Everton. Obviously, Gary was leading Manchester United that day and you were leading Everton. Describe to us that intensity, because obviously we see you in the tunnel. It's a famous YouTube video, obviously, of going back to that time of, Gary was super intense. I also remember seeing that video of him with Schmeichel when Peter was at Man City. He didn't even want to look at him. Describe that moment.
Well, it didn't surprise me, let me tell you, because obviously he was my brother. But ultimately, when we pulled on the shirts, even when we was under 12s at Manchester United School of Excellence, we weren't brothers. We were teammates. We were colleagues. We were two people that were driven to win, driven to want to win. And so when I walked down the tunnel and they got out first, I didn't expect a hug at the bottom of the tunnel from my brother. I didn't expect even a high five, because I knew what he was like. I knew what he was like with other players that he'd stood next to. I knew I'd been on his same team, and I knew how he was so focused to win. So when I got to the end of the tunnel, I've got to say there was a part of me thought, this is a bit weird. I'm stood next to my brother. No acknowledgement, no hello, no what you doing tonight, no what you doing tonight. But ultimately, I knew how he was feeling, because I was feeling the same way. And I always think, like, what would my mum think, who never ever wanted us to fall out, always wanted us to be the best of friends? She must have been thinking, at least say hello, or shake hands or something. But ultimately, it was one of those funny moments when I think we probably overdid it just to make sure that we were both probably in the zone. And it's something now when I look back, and my sister sends it to us every time before a family meal. Is this what it's going to be like tonight at the family meal? We're just going to stand off at the tunnel. So it was a funny moment.
Brilliant, brilliant. Phil, let's move on to team culture. And as you know, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you are the team manager of the Lionesses, the England ladies team. How have you gone about building the team culture there within the national squad?
Well, it's different. It's different at international level because they're not your players all year round. So you get them for 10 days, 5, 6, 7 times in a year. So I think what we decided was not to go after too many things, and not achieve many. So I think I focused on the fundamentals, hard work and togetherness. I thought, and I added something on top of that, which was a little bit of the style of play that we wanted to be. I wanted us to be brave. So, but the togetherness one, when we have camps, we used to label every camp or get a title. What's our focus? What's our objective? Togetherness was the main thing I wanted to focus on, because we're getting players from Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, Birmingham, Lyon. So we're getting players from every different kinds of culture coming in for a 10-day period. So I wanted us to be together every minute of every session, and that took a lot of work, a lot of preparation, a lot of sort of like innovative ways of doing it. We spoke about huddles, debriefs. We tried to do it in different ways, but ultimately the togetherness one was the main thing I went after, and then the bravery one was the one where I thought, I want to give them the confidence and the platform to go out onto the pitch being fearless, thinking that, not thinking of the mistake, thinking of how good they will feel, trying to play the right way, the right style, a beautiful way of football, and try and change the perception of what people thought of us. And I used to always say to them that if you're trying to do the right thing and trying to be brave, I would never criticise you, I would never drop you. But it's when you don't do the right thing, it's when you try and hide or you don't show for the ball, is when I would question your place in the team. And we try to develop those two things. And then along the way, I wanted us to have the best time of our lives. I think that was really important to the team, that creating memories, I think, are a fantastic objectives, and having the time of your life meant that you was enjoying it. If you're not enjoying anything, you don't do it to the best of your ability. So I think that was really important. And I think from a personal point of view, the connection with the players, I wanted them to believe that I believed in them, and for that to happen, I had to connect with them as people first, and that it takes a lot of hard work.
Yeah, obviously the big word is trust, building trust, and it must be a very difficult thing for you, because like you just mentioned there, it's not like you see them on a daily basis. If you're working at a club, for example, you see them, as you mentioned, 10 days there, maybe a tournament there, then 5 days there. I mean, how is that possible to build trust and to build connection with players with such a short span? Yeah.
In between, we call it like the on-camp model and the off-camp model. Now, the off-camp model, I only focused on the off-camp model because when they went back to their clubs, I wanted them to believe that I was still caring about them. So I went to every single game I possibly could. And after every single game, I would always try and connect with the player, drop a text, a wave, and a hello in the tunnel, or just to make sure that they're aware that I'm there and that I'm looking at them and that I'm caring about them. And that was, we had some players in America. We had a player playing in Houston, we had a player playing in Seattle, and they used to play at like between 1 and 3 in the morning English time. So early on, let's say the first 12 months, I used to set my alarm. And I used to set my alarm to make sure that when they finished that game, I always made sure I dropped them a text. How are you? How did the game go? And a couple of movements from the game that I would tell them, just so that when they got back to the dressing room, they thought, oh, it's 3 in the morning in England, but the England coach is watching. That is someone that cares about us. So I made a sort of like my own strategy that was to become part of our mantra, that everybody has to care for each other. And then all of a sudden, after games, there would be conversations, there would be WhatsApp groups, and all of a sudden, the off-camp model and the on-camp model became just a model, and that's how we built it. But the messaging after games, going and making sure that they would see you at games and they would feel your presence there, I thought was absolutely vital. And I would always go out for the warm-up. The warm-up is when there's not many people in the stadium. So when they would come in from the warm-up, I always made sure that they saw that I was in the stadium. And that I thought was really important. So when they came into camp, we could talk about things that they'd done in the games, things that they'd done that you can't see on a TV screen. So ultimately, we started to build relationships.
Now, obviously, 2020, I actually, one of the things I said to myself when it was the 1st of January is, all right, I'm not going to ask people about COVID, okay? Let's just move on from this. Everybody's had an interesting 2020, but going back to that with staying connected with your players during the last 7 months, you probably haven't been able to see them. How's that been for you, and how did your team go about that? Talking about your team of physiotherapists and assistant coaches, etc.
At the very start of COVID, we tried to connect professionally. We tried to connect professionally to keep involved, set tasks, watch games, or do things work-wise. And then after about 3 weeks, I learned very quickly that everybody needed fun. Everybody, because all we were doing was on Zoom calls, meetings calls. We were working. We were hearing bad things and negative things. People were dying. This COVID thing. There was pressures. There was everything going on. So then what I thought was, instead, I didn't want to be the one that was putting more work on my staff, more pressure on my staff. So what I decided to do was, I thought, right, every time I touch base with my staff now, I'm not going to talk work with them. I'm gonna think about the mental side. I wanted them to have fun. I wanted us to have fun. I wanted us to try and create some kind of memory from the lockdown that tried to get us through the lockdown. So at the start, what I did was every Saturday morning, we had I paid for a fitness instructor to put a hip session on for my staff. There was about 20 staff on. But throughout the week, we would try and build the session ourselves. So everybody would say, what exercise would we not want to do? Well, burpees was the one that we didn't
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say burpees, and you took it.
Everybody hates burpees. So the goalkeeping coach, who's a little bit, hardcore, said 200 burpees. So on the Saturday, so throughout the week, we would try and build our session against the exercises we didn't want to do. So every Saturday morning, we would do this HIIT class. It started with, so before the HIIT class, you had to go for a 3K run, and then you had to go and do the 35 to 40 minute HIIT session. Well, the burpees became something that we fell in love with, and then after the HIIT session, the next 24 hours was texts of how we can't feel our glutes, how we can't feel our hamstrings. It became, and then on the Saturday night, it was a glass of wine on the WhatsApp group became, I've earned this today. And then what we started to do then is because the exercise was becoming so important and such a social side, we then set up a training WhatsApp group where we then started saying, right, we're doing 1K runs today, who can do it in the fast? And we started to get competitive on an exercise. And ultimately, that became part of our week. Now, I thought it was just something fun for us. When we came out of COVID the first time, we went back into camp. And after the first staff meeting, I always say, look, any of the staff wants anything to say. And it was the team photographer, a brilliant lady who would probably never exercise much in the group before in her life. She said, I just want to say one thing, that the only thing that got me through the lockdown was them classes in the WhatsApp groups during, I got, it was probably one of the highlights of my job so far, is that we connected on a more personal level, but we focused on the mental side, the mental freshness, the mental happiness, and I think that was really important during the COVID.
Yeah. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, you're the first, obviously I've interviewed a lot of coaches in the last few months about this, and the answer has mostly been, obviously training programs, mindset, etc., but you're the first one that's really brought in the emphasized fun. And just hearing about raising a glass of wine on the weekend to celebrate a good week's training, that creates an open and honest culture. Is that we don't have to sneak away and go there, because we want a glass of wine, but to share that with the group, for example, creates like an ownership in a way of like, we earned this, for example. So I think that's absolutely brilliant.
It was great because what happened is that on the Saturday night, then somebody else would ask a question where we have our press officer who's a bit of a quiz master, and all of a sudden she went, right, I've got 5 questions, and all of a sudden the 5 general knowledge questions became 10, and all of a sudden you got through a couple of hours having fun, having a glass of wine, just on a WhatsApp quiz question. And I'm like, ultimately during the last 8-9 months, I don't think there's many people had that much fun.
Agree.
And I think from a mental point of view, that's the only thing that we focused on. And I've got to say, it was brilliant because for the rest of the day, you was on Teams calls, Zoom calls. You was, at the end of the day, your head was frazzled because you was looking into a screen for like 7-8 hours. And because you was at home, the amount of work that you was probably doing was double what you would be doing if you was going to an office, because you was literally just sat still. So ultimately, the exercise became part of our fun.
So by the sounds of it, it's actually you've used this period to a positive in terms of connecting better or getting to know each other more than, because if you'd be at a training camp, for example, yes, you have your breakfast, lunch, dinners together, etc. But here it's really been about getting to know each other, still compete with each other, challenge each other. So you've actually put it into a massive positive by the sounds of it.
Well, I think what we wanted to do is that everybody in the world was going through the same thing. Nobody was stealing a march on anyone. Everyone was in COVID. Nobody was training. Nobody was actually out there on the training field. So what we wanted to do we said, right, let's do something that might just steal as a march when we come back into training. Let's do something different. Let's do something out of our comfort zones that nobody else in the world was doing. That was our first thoughts in the first 3 weeks. Everybody will probably be on Zoom calls. Everybody will probably be on a spin bike. So we said, let's do something that nobody else is doing. Let's do something that might just give us the edge when we get to a critical moment, a bump in the road. Those moments that actually test you as a staff and as a unit, but more than else. Because you can go on a spin bike and you can put but ultimately it's the connection that actually means. And I always say, Sir Alex, before we used to go out, if you can look around the room and you can trust the person to your right, you can trust the person to your left, and you can trust the person in front of you, then you're in good shape. And if you can do that, you're going to be successful. And that's how I wanted to get our staff, that I wanted us to connect. So then when we went onto camp and we're working 24 hours a day, I would help the person out to my right, and I'd trust the person to my left to help me out.
Yeah, it's almost sounds like a Navy SEAL type of mentality. That's pretty much one of their mottos as well, is the person to your left and the person to your right. So, moving on, because I could stay on that subject for another hour, but let's go on leadership and captaincy. In your opinion, what constitutes a good captain in a team?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because before you go there, because you had one of the key successes of Manchester United during your time was that you had leaders in the locker room. You didn't just have one. You had obviously, you had Rio, you had Gary, you had Roy Keane, you had so many leaders in that locker room. How important is it, okay, that's maybe 2 questions here.
Yeah.
The first question was, what do you look for in a captain? And my second question is it important to have leaders in the locker room? So 2 questions there.
Yeah, I think there's different types of captains. I've played with Roy Keane, led by example, ferocious, standard setting. If you're going into battle, he's charging at the front with his flag, and he's the one that's going to carry the team with him. David Beckham, captain for England, wasn't like that at all, but actually produced moments that inspired you. He was a softer type of captain who would put his arm around you, would say well done to you in a different way. Tony Adams would want to fight the whole world for you, and you had to go with him. So I've seen different types of leaders. The one thing I would say about captains is that when they get on the field or the training ground, they better be prepared to stand up and lead the way. I think they better be the one that when it's a big game, they stand up. They've got to be one of those players in the team that you can rely on. They can't be someone that you can't rely on. So I think reliability and honesty is a major thing. I think they've got to. Me as a manager, I look at my captains and think, who's going to be my eyes and ears and my driver when I'm not here? Because I worked at Manchester United, or I played at Manchester United, where Sir Alex was the driver of the bus, but on the bus he had 4 or 5 that was policing the dressing room, the 4 policemen in the dressing room. So it's someone that has your work ethic, your values, your philosophy that can implement then into the dressing room. What was your second question?
Second question is, how important was it to have leaders in the locker room? Because maybe you've just answered that there, where you said Sir Alex had 4 or 5 leaders on the bus or in the change rooms, for example. Because you can't be in the change rooms, or a lot of coaches see the change room as the players' domain, for example.
I didn't realise that until I went to Everton, when my first year, and David Moyes wanted to change the culture. There was probably 1, 2, 3 players out of 26. Wasn't enough to change, because you still had the others influencing more than the 3 captains. But then when he brought in a real young, hungry players, then when you get 4 or 5, then all of a sudden 4 or 5 infiltrating the dressing room, 4 or 5 driving the standards, you almost then start to take over. And that's when, as a manager, you then start standing back a little bit, because you've got the players in the dressing room. I've got it with England. With my women's team. I've got Steph Orton, Lucy Bronze, Jill Scott, Ellen White, Karen. I've got 4 or 5 senior players, plus a couple of younger ones that have got the same mentality. I can stand back. It took me 6 or 7 months to get that, to get the feeling, but I can stand back, and ultimately, if somebody's late, the players deal with it. They know the standards that I require. If somebody's not wearing the right outfit for training, or he's got the weight, the tracksuit top tied around the waist, the cap on, the wrong, they police that, because they know the standards, and that's where you need people to infiltrate that. If I probably lost 3 or 4 of them through injury for a period of time, then all of a sudden the 2 or 3 that are driving the standards don't have as much influence on those that are trying to create a little bit of difference. So that's when you get that little bit of diversion and problems within the probably spirit. Once the 3 came back in, then all of a sudden they start steamrolling everybody else again. So I think it's important to get, I think 5 is a really good number. When you talk about leadership groups within dressing rooms, I always think 4 or 5 is the number.
Out of a squad at 20, 25.
I call them captains. You have leadership groups. With England, I have probably 4 or 5 captains. All that I think that can be my captains, I get them in. I make them part of the decision-making process, because they're the ones that are going in and speaking to the rest of the 26-player squad. So I think 4 or 5 leaders within a dressing room is vital. If you don't have that, I don't think you can have success.
Talking about, just going back to standards, you obviously talk about standards a lot, or driving high standards within a team of excellence, and that can be in a football team, that can be in a company, that can be can be in anything. Who goes about setting the standards? Is that the coaching staff that set the standards and the values, or is that a group thing that you involve the players?
It's got. I mean, the manager's got to set the standard, I think, but ultimately what I like to do, I like to sit down with the captains and I say, right, these are the standards. Or sometimes I'll say, like the point I've got with my team now, because I'm 2.5 years in, I'm going, what standards do you want? And I let them come up with their own values. I let them come up with the standards that they believe will help us be successful. Now, what that does is it empowers them. It gives them the feeling that they're involved in the process. Plus, it means that when the standards drop, they're accountable for their own standards within the group, because they're the ones that have made the standards, made the values, and they're the ones that have to live the values in the team. So ultimately, if you say, what's important to the team? Well, the way we speak to each other, or the discipline of turning up on time is important. We write that down. If they don't do that, they hold themselves accountable for the rules that they've actually made themselves. And I think that's far more powerful than a coach coming in saying, these are the 10 rules that I want, because ultimately these are my rules. They're not the rules that we've created as a group to follow. So I think that's what I did at the start is I put my values on the team, because I wanted to implement my values and my philosophy to set the standard. Then we started to evolve it to the standards and values of everybody.
Moving on to Work ethic. I want to talk a little bit about obviously Cristiano Ronaldo with his work ethic. I mean, here he is at 34. I don't know, 34, 35, still playing at the highest level. Um, Tell us a little bit about how it was, being with Cristiano. I mean, he's the ultimate professional. What were the things you saw in him that you knew this guy's going to be good? Oh, and he already was good when he came to
Yeah.
Manchester United, but he's gone to like another level and another level and another level.
His work ethic was better than any. His work ethic was off the charts. I mean, from the minute he woke up in the morning, he told us he was going to be the best player in the world. But actually, he put his money where his mouth is, because from the minute he woke up, from the breakfast he had, the
Was
way
he teased about that? Did the guys have a little bit of a go at him when he said, "I'm going to be
yeah,
the best
yeah.
player"?
Because when you see a 18, 19-year-old lad say, I'm going to be the best player in the world, you automatically think, well, you've got a long way to go at this moment in time, and that's a big statement to make. But I think very quickly we realised we had something very special, because the preparation, the skill, the practice, the work ethic, he lived and breathed trying to be the best player in the world. He had a talent, obviously, but that boy, when he gets home from a European game and he goes straight into the gym and does his stretching, his ice baths at 2, 3 in the morning, that wasn't to impress the coach. That was because he wanted to be the best. He wanted to be the best the day after. And the ability to do that day in, day out was phenomenal. And when you see the skills and when you see the body and the physique, that's through hard work. That's through dedication. That is through he's invested all his life to becoming the best. And when I talk to my players now, I show them and I explain to them what the best do. And he is the standard bearer about, actually, it's an investment in your life. The massages you have, the stretching, the nutrition, the meals that you cook for your body is an investment in your body for you to become the best you possibly can. And he did not need a coach next to him to tell him what to do. He was self-driven, and I think that is something Sir Alex used to always say to us: if you're only doing what your coach or teacher is telling you to do, that's not enough. It's the bits after that will make you great.
Yeah, it's a whole lifestyle, isn't it? It's not just about what you do at the training ground, or it's a whole lifestyle. And then, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same documentary I have on Ronaldo, on his home. It's a performance center. He's hired his own chef. He has a gym in there. He has ice baths. He has, I think, one of those ice, what do you call them, cryotherapy tanks. It's a performance center. So even when he gets home, he's not lying on the couch. He's still doing all those recovery sessions.
Every meal is weighed out to perfection. He's sleeping in the afternoon. He sleeps the right amount of minutes, because ultimately sleep's the best form of recovery. It's no accident that actually he's become the best, because everything he's invested in, he's put the work in. And you look at him now, he could play for under 10 years without a shadow of a doubt. His physique and his physical ability, he never misses a game of football. Never. He scored 42 goals on average every season for 18 seasons. It's incredible.
Yeah, the longevity there. Getting back to you, who were the toughest players, or who was the toughest player that you came up against? Who was that one player that you were like, oh no, not him?
Two players I used to play against that I thought, wow. Zidane was one. Zidane, I came on for United in the Champions League game, Old Trafford, and I was in midfield, and they played the ball to Zidane. In one movement, he sent me for the biggest dummy ever. Just in one movement, he was big. He looked so slow, but he was so fast. He was gracious in the way that he moved. Honestly, it was like, you know, when you're playing against someone and you're actually applauding him as he's doing his skill. I think that was the one that I thought, wow, I'm not good enough to be on the same pitch as you. I'm sorry. And then another one was probably like in the early years, Ryan Giggs. You talk about his career going to the age of 42. He was phenomenal. His ability, his durability, his work ethic was incredible. And I think them two players were the two that I always think. Giggsy was my hero, and the one I looked up to, because he was 2-3 years older than me. He was the standard bearer for a lot of young kids coming through at Manchester United. But his longevity in the game was phenomenal. The work that he used to put in, just to train, just to recover for the game. It was almost science, and them two are the ones that I always look at.
Yeah, I mean, his pace was just unreal. I mean, how he could just tear up the left side there, it was just phenomenal. I mean,
Phenomenal.
how fast he was. Still when, like you said, when he was 39, 40, he was still tearing it up. Yeah.
He was a left winger. He became a centre forward. He became a number 10. He became a right winger and a central midfield player. He just had it. He just had that ability, and it was fantastic.
Obviously, Phil, I want to be respectful of your time because it is the first Monday of the new year, and as you just mentioned off the call there, that it's back to business. But one or two more questions. Here's a fun one. If you were not involved in football at all, you can't be a pundit, you can't be a coach, you can't be a sporting director. What would your career be? What would you have done?
Oh, dear me. I was better at cricket than I was at football, so I've got to say cricket was my first love. I still love cricket now. It's the best sport in the world. Obviously, coming from South Africa, you probably love cricket as well. I loved everything about it. It was I'd say, you don't have the fans on the side wanting to kill you. It's social. It was a fantastic. I was an opening batter. I loved the 8 hours in the day when you can bat, and I loved the travelling to different countries to play, seeing different. The preparation for a cricket game is totally different than preparation for a football game. Cricket wasn't really my first love. I've got to say it was. I love the intensity of it. People say it's a nice game, but it's so intense when you're out in that middle and you've got a West Indian fast bowler bowling at you, or a South African. You're trying to get out bowling. It just so intense, but such a brilliant sport. And so I'd say cricket probably.
All right, you have to choose one: Test cricket, one day, or T20.
Test cricket. I hate T20, hate one day cricket, because I was like that. I was called Jeff Boycott when I was a cricketer, because I was just the one that just read ones and twos. My brother was more Freddie Flintoff type player, but I was a test match cricket. I can go to Old Trafford sometimes, sit there all day and watch test match cricket.
So all I'm hearing is that you're actually a very patient person, because you're that opening batsman that would just see out the day, for example. My
brother once run me out on purpose because I was boring him at the other end, and because I was just that dot ball. So after a bit, he hit the ball, said yes, let's run, and then stopped, and I was left, and he run me out because I was boring him.
Excellent. Oh, I love those stories. Final question, Phil. In your opinion, and obviously you've covered a lot of this in this podcast, what does it take to be champion-minded?
Champion-minded. Relentlessness, obsession, that ability to never give up, that ability to overcome obstacles and boundaries and disappointments. I think that is a champion's. I think the relentlessness, we use it a lot with my brother and gigs, and the relentlessness to keep going, the relentlessness to keep training, the relentlessness to never drop your standards. I think that for me is what most champions do. You look at McIlroy, Federer, Nadal, Jack Nicklaus, their relentlessness to be the best, to never stop, to keep moving forward. And we spoke about it with Sir Alex about moving with the times, being ahead of the game, just making sure that you never stand still. He used to say to us, if you stand still, you get overtaken. So make sure that the bus keeps moving forward. I think that's what champions do. You win a tournament, you win a game of football, you're thinking about the next one and then the next one. And ultimately, I think that's what the best do.
Brilliant. Last thing, if anybody wants to connect with you, I see you're on Twitter now.
Yes.
Great job. So what's that address there? I think it's Fizzer
181.
Fizzer 181 on Twitter. There's where you can follow Phil. Phil, have a fantastic year, should I say. All the best with, obviously, the Lionesses. And thanks again. There you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one with Phil Neville. Remember, this podcast is available on iTunes, YouTube, Amazon Podcasts, and via my website, allistairmccaw.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Allistair McCaw, on Facebook, Allistair McCaw page, And on Instagram, be champion minded. Until next time, remember you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded.